Welcome back to Bonchon Warrior, where we live wonderfully and bring our best. This is Ian Schneider, your host, and today, let's resume our previously interrupted programming. So I've really enjoyed exploring the concepts of speaking and listening, and I think it's actually helped make me a better listener and speaker in my own life. Another class that I worked with the trainees on is how we can reduce our filler words, something that I have struggled with a lot growing up. I am from California, and I used to find it very common to use the word like, or you know, or up top, like this, like I was running to the mall, and then I saw Derek, and like Derek didn't even look at me. He didn't even acknowledge me, but that's like crazy. Because, I was texting him last night and he totally responded with a smiley face. It's like not fair. So what I've tried to impart to the trainees is the value of pauses. Especially when you are giving a public speech, or if you're teaching in front of a class, a public speaking opportunity, pauses for up to 4 seconds oftentimes do not register in the minds of the audience. In fact, I find that using pauses not only allows us as speakers to collect our thoughts, but also can create some tension between the speaker and the audience. And that tension is what helps hold attention. And I find that very, very useful to be a more compelling and engaging speaker. Utilizing pauses. Yes. Session 1 went very, very well. I realized that what I lacked in expertise, I could always make up for with honesty and effort. So one of my biggest takeaways from working with the trainees this first time around is that I eventually grew very unafraid to express to them when I think I did things wrong, or when I think I made a mistake in my instructions or in my work that led them to do more work than was necessary on a given project or assignment. For example, with the podcast interview project, I wanted the trainees to have 3 scripted questions. And that was the instruction that I gave, right? 3 scripted questions. And in the flow of the interview, ask at least 2 follow-up questions. However, when I use the word scripted questions, I have a feeling that the trainees interpreted that as having to prepare an actual script, which is not at all what an interview should consist of. It should not be a written dialogue like a movie. I believe that the best kinds of interviews that I hear sound more like conversations. It's 2 people going back and forth, truly listening to each other and asking thoughtful questions that reflect the fact that they are deeply engaged in what the other person is saying, and going back and forth in order to arrive at an agreed upon truth. I explained that to them. I said, look, I had a vision for this assignment, and I don't think I articulated that vision very well, because I think that you worked too hard on this assignment, when I think that in reality, just simply preparing a couple of talking points in response to the quote-unquote scripted questions would have been very sufficient. And I think that your interviews would have sounded more natural and free-flowing, and that using a few pauses or filler words in the context of an interview is quite normal. I listen to so many podcasts, and that's quite normal. Some speakers are more experienced, of course, and they are able to utilize a lot less fillers and excessive pauses, but not everybody. They're not perfect, and neither do you have to be perfect. Going into session 2 is listening and speaking methodology. And this is an area in which I really struggled to create the curriculum that I was comfortable with. I really felt like I was winging it in some ways. I felt like I was balancing a lot of different concerns in order to make a proper listening and speaking methodology curriculum. For one, Korean English teachers don't prioritize listening and speaking in their teaching. And fair enough, because the goal of most Korean secondary level students is to prepare themselves for the Sunung, which is a national comprehensive test that is multiple choice that mostly emphasizes reading, at least in the English section, with a brief listening exercise thrown in. So that was part of my difficulty. How do I encourage these teachers to incorporate listening and speaking into their classroom when it doesn't actually fit into the overarching philosophy of the Korean education system as a whole? Also, these teachers are very well educated, very well experienced in different teaching methodologies of EFL. So what can I say that is not just boring review to them? Moreover, I wanted to do kind of teaching demos in listening and speaking activities. And one of my other instructors, Christy, you've listened to her before, she teaches micro-teaching. So demonstrating a teaching act and having the instructor provide feedback is a form of micro-teaching. So what I was doing was essentially overlapping into micro-teaching. But another instructor, Janet, she teaches games and activities. So as much as I want to talk about speaking activities, that goes into what Janet's topic is. So for a little bit, I really struggled to consider, what is my niche? Where does my course fit in to the overarching curriculum that this program offers here at JIEI? And in fact, I just finished reading a professional development book called Training Foreign Language Teachers, A Reflective Approach. And one of the best takeaways that I really want to explore moving forward is the idea of synchronic cohesion. This is the idea that between the concurrent courses that are running in a teacher training course, how can we integrate our assessments so that the trainees are not starting from scratch as they work on each individual project, but rather how can we design our curricula so that assignments can dovetail into each other, which will not only reduce the trainees' workload, but also be able to make our program look more legit because it looks like we've really thought things through and we planned things out. So after the trainees gave their speaking demonstrations, a lot of them were a little bit tired and run down, and they said that they had spent all night working on their presentations for their performance. And looking back, I again think that I did not clearly articulate the vision of what I wanted out of this assignment. What I really want out of the assignment of giving a speaking activity demonstration is for the trainees to not only have the experience of designing a speaking activity, but also the experience of teaching the activity. The reason I want them to have the experience of actually teaching the activity is because that is a true stress test where you can figure out if the ideas in your head are truly executable in the fashion in which you designed it. And if not, if road bumps or difficulties arise, how can we reflect and what adjustments can we make in order to make our speaking activities more effective in a class context? How can we engage more students at the same time? How can we engage the rate of participation? How can we make our instructions more clear? How can we break up our instructions and our student action so that we don't have to give all of our instructions up front? How can we break an activity into piece by piece, what some people would call instruct, do, instruct, to where the students can do an entire task in bite-sized pieces rather than having to absorb all instructions up front? These are all things that I wanted the trainees to consider, which is why I think performing the activity and actually teaching the activity is more beneficial than simply swap shopping and talking about activities. Let's take a break. We can resume this topic in another time. But for now, I hope everyone is having a wonderful week. And this is Ian from Banchan Warrior, reminding you to live wonderfully and always bring your best.